This next one's short, so we'll just keep going. Dealing with Dragons, Chapter 7, in which Cimorene and Kazul make a journey underground. Cimorene was surprised to hear that Kazul intended to take her along on the visit to Morwen, and she was not entirely sure she liked the idea. She had heard a great deal about the enchanted forest, and none of it was reassuring. People who traveled there were always getting changed into flowers, or trees, or animals, or rocks, or doing something careless and having their heads turned backward, or being carried off by ogres, or giants, or trolls, or enchanted by witches or wicked fairies. It did not sound like a good place for a casual, pleasant visit. On the other hand, it seemed unlikely that anything dreadful would happen to Cimorene if she were traveling with a dragon, and she was looking forward to seeing Morwen again. Besides, Cimorene was curious. And anyway, she said to herself, Kazul says I'm going, and there's no point in worrying about it if I don't have any choice. Nevertheless, she decided to take one of the smaller magic swords along with her, if Kazul said it was all right. Cimorene saw no point in taking unnecessary chances. Kazul had no objection, so Cimorene picked out a small, plain-looking sword in a worn leather scabbard that made the wearer invincible, and they started off. Cimorene had assumed that Kazul would fly through the pass, but Kazul said no. It's not that easy to get into the enchanted forest, she explained. At least, not if you're trying to get in. Princes and youngest sons and particularly clever tailors stumble into it by accident all the time, but if one wants to go there on purpose, one has to follow the proper route. I didn't think dragons had that kind of problem, Cimorene said. Dragons don't, Kazul replied, but you're not a dragon. So instead of flying through the pass of silver ice, Kazul led Cimorene through the tunnels. Cimorene had to walk very quickly to keep up, even though Kazul was moving slowly. It was not long before she was wishing that the tunnels were high enough for her to ride on Kazul's back. The route twisted around and up and back and forth and down and around again, until Cimorene was thoroughly lost. Finally, they came to a gate made of iron bars that completely blocked the passage. Cimorene studied it carefully, but she could see no sign of a handle or a lock. This is the entrance to the Caves of Fire and Night, Kazul said. Be careful from here on, and don't wander away, or you'll get lost. Cimorene refrained from saying that as far as she was concerned, they were lost already. How are you going to open it? She asked instead. Like this, said Kazul. By night and flame and shining rock, open thou thy hidden lock, Alberolingarn. As the sound of Kazul's voice died away, the iron gate swung silently open. That's a very unusual opening spell, Cimorene commented, impressed. It wasn't always that complicated, Kazul said. She sounded almost apologetic. I believe the first version was very simple, just open sesame, but word got around and we had to change it. Cimorene nodded and followed Kazul through the gate and into the Caves of Fire and Night. For the first 100 yards or so, the only difference Cimorene could see between these caves and the ordinary tunnels on the other side of the gate was that the Caves of Fire and Night were warmer. Then, very suddenly, her lamp went out, plunging everything into complete and utter blackness. Cimorene stopped walking immediately. Kazul? It's quite all right, Princess, Kazul's disembodied voice said out of the darkness. This happens all the time here. Don't bother trying to relight the lamp. Just put your hand on my elbow and follow along that way. All right, Cimorene said doubtfully. She groped with her free hand in the direction of Kazul's voice and scraped her knuckles on the dragon's scales. Ow! Take your time, Kazul advised. I'm ready, Cimorene said. Her right hand was pressed flat against the cool, rough-edged scales at the back of Kazul's left forearm. Just don't move too fast or I'll lose you or get stepped on or something. Kazul did her best to oblige, but Cimorene still had difficulty in keeping up. She had to take at least 3 steps for every one of Kazul's, and it seemed that every time she moved her foot, she hit a rock or an uneven place in the tunnel floor. Then she would stumble, and her hand would scrape and slide against Kazul's scales, so that she was afraid she would lose contact with the dragon. Are you sure I shouldn't try and relight the lamp? Cimorene asked, after her 5th painful stumble and slide. Oh, quite sure, Kazul said. You see, it isn't... Ah, there it goes. While Kazul was speaking, there was a flicker of light, and then the darkness rolled aside like a curtain being pulled. Cimorene found herself standing in a large cave, whose walls glittered as if they were studded with thousands of tiny mirrors. The lamp in her left hand was burning cheerfully once more. "Was it the lamp?" Cimorene asked after studying it for a moment. "Or was it me?" "It was the caves," Kazul said. "That was one of the reasons they're of night as well as of fire." "Only one of the reasons? I don't like the sound of that." "Oh, you'll be quite all right as long as you're with me," Kazul assured her. "Very few things are willing to mess with a dragon even in the dark, and the periods of darkness don't last long. It's because the magic of these caves doesn't affect us as much as other people, or so I'm told." "You mean that blackness is likely to come back?" Kazul nodded. "Then let's get as far as we can before it does," Cimorene said, and started across the cave. There were 4 tunnels leading out of the opposite side of the glittering cavern. Kazul took the second from the left without hesitating an instant. "Where do all these tunnels go?" Cimorene asked, glancing at the other 3 openings as she followed Kazul. "The one on the right leads to a chain of caverns," Kazul said over her shoulder. "The first few are quite ordinary, but then you come to one full of hot sulfur pools. Some of the older dragons bathe there. They claim the water is good for rheumatism. Beyond that is a cave with molten silver dripping down the walls, and the chain ends at a deep chasm with a river of red-hot melted rock at the bottom." "Doesn't sound very attractive," Cimorene commented. "The dwarf smiths find it very useful for forging magic swords," Kazul assured her. "The second tunnel on the right takes you into a maze. The tunnels and caverns constantly shift around, so no matter how carefully you mark your way, you always get lost." "Even dragons?" Kazul nodded. "Though I believe there was one prince who managed to find his way out with a magic ball of string." "Oh, bother," said Cimorene. The lights had gone out again, just as they emerged into a small cave. "That's quite all right. This part's easy," Kazul said. "Next time I'm going to bring a cane," Cimorene muttered. "Where do these other tunnels lead?" "The one on the left goes through a couple of caverns that are very pretty, but not very interesting. We're always chasing knights and princes out of it, though. They come for flasks of water from the bottomless pool at the far end." "What does it do? Ow!" She had just banged her right elbow against the wall of the cave in the dark. "It casts a cloud of darkness for 20 miles around," Kazul replied. "How useful," Cimorene muttered balefully, rubbing her elbow. "And this tunnel leads to the enchanted forest by way of the king's cave," Kazul finished. "Oh, good, I was hoping to see that," Cimorene said. "The king's cave was the chamber where the first king of the dragons had found Colin's stone, and the Historia Dracorum had not described it anywhere near well enough to suit Cimorene. And here's the light coming back, thank goodness. Let's hurry before it goes again." They went through 3 small caves and 2 more periods of blackness before they reached the king's cave. Kazul pointed out various locations of interest, such as the wall of crystal with a chip in one corner, where the prince of the ruby throne had stolen a piece to make a magic ring, and the jewel-studded cavern where the king of the dragons met with people who needed impressing. There was one very eerie cave full of slabs of black rock. Most were standing on end, though a few had fallen over. Kazul said they were all enchanted princes. "All of them?" Cimorene asked, appalled. There were at least 40 of the stone slabs, and the cave was quite crowded. Kazul shook her head. "No, the one on the end is just an ordinary boulder." "How did it happen?" "Well, the princes came to steal some of the water of healing from the well at the end of the cave," Kazul said. "There are 2 dippers by the well. One is tin, the other is solid gold and covered with jewels. The princes all tried to use the gold one, though they'd been told that only the tin dipper would work. It's no more than they deserve." Cimorene frowned, thinking of some of the princes she had known. "Well, I won't deny that they probably behaved foolishly, but—" "Foolishly?" Kazul snorted. "Any reasonably well-educated prince ought to have sense enough to follow directions when he's on a quest, but all of these fellows were sure they knew better. If they'd simply done what they were told, they wouldn't be here." "Still, turning them into slabs of stone forever seems a little extreme." "Oh, they won't be stone forever," Kazul said. "Sooner or later, someone will come along who has the sense not to improvise, and he'll succeed in getting the water. Then he'll use some of it to disenchant this lot, and the cave will be empty for a while until the next batch of idiots start arriving." Cimorene felt better knowing that the princes would someday be freed, though she had sense enough not to try doing it herself. Since she had not been on a quest for the Water of Healing, it was highly unlikely that she would be able to disenchant the princes even if she succeeded in taking the water. And she knew enough about quests and enchantments and the obtaining of things with magical properties to know that she would probably get into a lot of trouble if she tried. So she tucked the matter to the back of her mind and followed Kazul through the stone-filled cavern. She was careful not to step on any of the fallen slabs. Just outside the entrance to the next cave, Kazul stopped. "This," she said, "is the King's Cave. We have to cross it as quickly as we can. Don't stop in the middle, and don't say anything while we're inside. Understood?" "Good. Come on, then." As soon as she stepped inside the cave, Cimorene understood the reason for Kazul's request for silence. The walls, the ceilings, and even the floor were made of dark, shiny stone that multiplied and threw back echoes of even the smallest sound. The soft scraping of Kazul's scales against the floor sounded like 30 men sawing wood, and the tiny gasp Cimorene gave at the sight and sound of the cave was as loud as if she had shouted. Cimorene went on quietly and as carefully as she could. Halfway across, she noticed the vibration. It began as a gentle and not unpleasant buzzing in her bones, unrelated to the loud and continually multiplying echoes of her passage, though it, too, grew stronger the further into the cave they went. Kazul was in front of her now, and she saw the dragon's tail lash once, as if in pain or anger. Suddenly she remembered Kazul's description of the aura that made it impossible for most dragons to carry Colin's stone, and that this was the place where Colin's stone had been found. No wonder Kazul was uncomfortable. Cimorene found herself wishing she could stop and pay attention to the humming in her bones, but she remembered Kazul's directions and continued walking. She had nearly reached the exit when she saw a pebble about the size of her thumbnail, made of the same dark, shiny stone as the cavern walls. Kazul had said nothing about picking things up, so Cimorene veered a little to the right and scooped the pebble up as she passed. A moment later, she was out of the cave. "Phew," said Kazul. "I'm glad that's over. From here on it should be easy." "Well, good," said Cimorene. She dropped the pebble into her pocket to look at more closely later, and followed Kazul down the narrow, winding tunnel.